So really the purpose of this evening, the reason why we're here is that we want to increase and strengthen the connections between British Columbia and Quebec. In a lot of ways we're facing very similar pipeline battles, and there's certainly a lot that Quebec has to learn from what BC has gone through over the past number of years. So hopefully this will be, the first in many sort of events like this that strengthen those connections between the community in British Columbia and in Quebec. So we'll get to talking more about pipelines and politics in a minute, but the reason why I'm standing up here is to introduce my good friend Gabriel, who is still in the bathroom. So I guess I'll just have to be long-winded about it. Gab first became a spokesperson for ASE, which is the major student federation in Quebec, in 2010. And was their spokesperson through to near the end of the longest and most significant student strike probably in Quebec history, certainly the longest and arguably the most significant. I'm sure most of you are familiar with his work at that time when the 2012 strike was going on. Derek and I were at Rabble, and we were organizing Casserole Night in Canada and doing our best to cover it. And Gab was a very prominent media figure, trying to push back against really a media narrative that overwhelmingly just said that students were greedy, assholes that didn't understand economics or finance or anything, and just didn't know how good they had it. And since that time, Gabriel has published a book, Tenir Tête, which is a memoir of sorts of the student strike, and it's actually being released in English at the end of this month. Unfortunately, the timing didn't work out perfectly to have copies here, which would have been nice. But the English version of the book will be out at the end of the month, and it's a very good read, so I recommend it. And of course, as many of you are also aware, since the student strike, Gabriel has transitioned from a student activist into really a climate activist. And he's decided that climate and pipelines and tar sands are the most important thing that any of us can or should be working on right now. And of course, with this book, Tenir Tête, he was awarded the Governor General's Award for nonfiction, which came with a $25,000 prize in the fall. And what he did with that money is to go on Tout le monde en parle, which is an extremely popular talk show in Quebec, and promised to donate all of it to a coalition of community groups opposing the Energy East pipeline in Quebec. Pretty cool, right? So Gab can tell you more about Energy East and what that is, but he went on this talk show, and in a couple of minutes, he announced that he was going to donate $25,000. He asked the population of Quebec at large to match that donation through a crowdfunding site that he launched called Doublons la mise, double or nothing, I guess, or double the bet. And within minutes, they had raised the $50,000 that he wanted to raise, and within under a week, they had raised $400,000. Which is now a significant war chest. That war chest helped to organize the April 11th Act on Climate March in Quebec City, which was one of the largest protests in the history of Quebec City, and is helping to organize grassroots opposition along the route of the pipeline. And since that time, Gabriel has also taken a leadership role in a new group called Élan Global, which is a coalition of, celebrities, I guess, prominent figures, playwrights, activists, scientists, people from all walks of life with a high name recognition and a profile in Quebec, who have signed a manifesto calling not just for an end to pipelines, but an end to fossil fuels and an end to an economy that is not sustainable. All of which is to say that in the entire time I have known him, there is never a moment of his time that Gabriel is not trying to figure out how he can make this world a better place for other people. And for that, I deeply appreciate him. So without any further ado, let me introduce my friend Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois.
Let me introduce my friend Ethan Cox. So, good night, everyone. Hi, thank you for being here. Thank you for the beautiful opening. It's really a beautiful surprise to see so much people here tonight. If we were doing this in Montreal, with this weather, everybody would be out drinking beer.
That's after you're buying too.
Yeah. I'm not gonna be too long. Don't worry. So yeah, it's a very beautiful surprise to see so much people here tonight. Like you've probably already noticed, English is not my first language, so you will excuse my accents and my lack of vocabulary. Before I began being a spokesperson in 2012, I spoke probably not a single word of English, and I've learned English as an activist. So I can maybe talk a little bit about my work here tonight in English, but after I will not be able to order my beer or something to eat. My vocabulary is strictly limited to political things, so I will stick to that. I will stick to that tonight. My introduction won't be long because I know you probably know everything about the tar sands in northern Alberta. You know that the industry has a plan to triple their production from the they want to triple their production in 2035. So, and you know that they need pipeline in order to proceed to that expansion of their production of tar sands. You fought here yourself against those projects of pipelines, the Kinder Morgan one, the Northern Gateway one, and Energy East pipeline. The Energy East pipeline is just one of many pipelines that are being put forward now as a way to export the tar sands oil, and in order to allow that expansion in northern Alberta. So I won't do all that introduction because I suppose you already know it, but I will simply briefly maybe try to do a snapshot of what exactly is Energy East, and after that, in second time, I just briefly summarize to you what is currently happening in Quebec, what does the mobilization looks like against that very controversial project. I think the first thing to say, and the most important thing to say about Energy East, is that it is by far, the biggest pipeline project related to the tar sands industry. If this project is built, it will be the biggest tar sands pipeline in the world. And we sometimes call those pipelines mega pipelines. If this applies to Northern Gateway and Kinder Morgan, I think we should say that in the case of Energy East, it's probably a mega pipeline. In terms of length, for example, Energy East pipeline is 1,600 kilometers long, which is 40% longer than Kinder Morgan and 35% longer than Northern Gateway. So only in terms of length, and it's 30% longer than Keystone XL also, to give an example. So it's a lot longer. We're talking essentially, it's a pipeline that would go from Alberta to New Brunswick. 2/3 of that pipeline is an already existing gas pipeline that would be converted into a tar sands oil pipeline, and 80% of the new pipeline that would be constructed is in Quebec, so starting from the border of Ontario to New Brunswick. In terms of volume now, maybe to once again give you an example by comparing it with the other projects, Energy East is supposed to carry 1.1 million barrels per day, which is more than 3 times the daily consumption of oil in Quebec. By comparison, once again, it's 23% more than Kinder Morgan, and more than the double, so 110% more than Northern Gateway. So also in terms of volume of oil transported, this project is much bigger than what those two pipelines are like. To give an idea, each day in Energy East, that 1.1 million barrels, this represents 1/90th of the worldwide consumption. So we're really here talking about a quantity of oil that is beyond imagination. The diameter of the pipeline would be more than 1.5 meters. So we're talking about something that is absolutely huge. And like I said, it's close to 1% of the worldwide consumption that would pass through this barrel every day. So, like I said, the portion that needs to be constructed is essentially in Quebec. We're talking about 701 rivers and lakes that would be crossed by that pipeline, essentially in highly populated areas in Quebec, so Montreal, Trois-Rivières, Quebec City. So a potential spill of that pipeline would have obviously huge social and environmental risks. More than 40% of the population of Quebec would see their water supply threatened by a spill. So and for very small economic benefits. TransCanada, the company that is putting forward this project, they're promising 60 long-term jobs in Quebec. So it's really, I'm still impressed after 1 year of talking about that project. I'm still impressed by the quantitative aspect of that pipeline. It's really by far the biggest pipeline project that we've seen in North America since a very long time. TransCanada itself is saying that they need 22 minutes to detect a spill. So this means that in 22 minutes, if there is a major break of the pipeline, we're talking about 2.6 million liters that could go out of the pipeline just before TransCanada detects it on his computers, on his informatics system. 2.6 million liters. To give you an idea, the disaster of Lac Mégantic was caused by 100,000 liters. So it's more than 100 times more. So TransCanada is saying 22 minutes before they can detect and shut off the pipeline if there's a spill. But they are also saying that if the spill is underneath 1.5%, their system is unable to detect it. And we can say, well, 1.5%, it is not a lot, but 1.5% of 1.1 million barrels per day, that begins to be a lot. That means that if there is a spill of 1.5%, which TransCanada recognized they cannot detect, that means that in one day it's the same number, 2.6 million liters that could go in the environment every day, till someone sees it, smell it from the air or from the ground, saying, oh, I think there's a spill. And then obviously it would take, once again, the 22 minutes in order to close the pipeline. I have to stay close to the mic?
Just because there's so many people recording, just stay in range.
I'm sorry. I love to walk when I speak. So I know it's a lot of numbers, but essentially I just wanted to point out the fact that the risks related to that pipeline are huge. And we're not talking about a pipeline that goes through, lands where nobody is living. We're talking about the most densely populated areas of Quebec, which is essentially all across the St. Lawrence River. This pipeline would also cross the St. Lawrence River. So it's the very concrete risks around the project are unbelievable. And like I said, for pretty small economic benefits, 60 long-term jobs, like I already said. So that's the first thing that is driving the mobilization in Quebec are that unbelievable numbers about the very concrete risks that a pipeline of that amplitude represents for the communities and the ecosystems that are directly on the path of the project. But there's also another angle, or another angle of critique that is being used to generate opposition to that pipeline. Like I said, it's 1.1 million barrels per day, and like you already know, the tar sands oil is probably the dirtiest oil in the world. The greenhouse gas emissions related to its extraction is 3 or 4 times higher than for conventional oil. So only to, let's say, fill that pipeline, and only to fill that pipeline, the tar sands industry would have to grow by 40%, only to generate enough oil to fill the Energy East pipeline. 40%, a 40% expansion of tar sands, so to fill that pipeline would represent, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, the equivalent of 7 million cars on the Canadian roads. So that means that saying yes to that pipeline means adding 7 million cars in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. I don't need to tell you that adding in one shot 7 million cars annihilates any chance that we could reach our objectives in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, objectives that are already beneath what the scientifics are telling us should be our reduction objectives. So, like, there is the first angle is of critic is the very concrete risks of that pipeline on the ground for the rivers, for the lakes, for the communities, for the ecosystems. And the other angle is the more, let's say, general or systemic argument saying that giving the go to that pipeline represents signing the end of any realistic reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. Like I said, 7 million new cars. So this means that saying if Quebec says yes to that pipeline, because between you and me, the decision lies a lot on Quebec, because like I said, it's essentially there that the new construction is going to happen. So what we're saying right now on the ground is if Quebec says yes to that project, it means that we will essentially accept that Canada will increase, that Canada will accept that that we will never achieve our goals in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So I won't give any more numbers. I think it's enough to see that that project is it is bigger than any project we've seen recently, and the implications, the local and global implications of that project justify a massive mobilization. That brings me to my second point tonight, which is the fact that I would say, fortunately, this mobilization has already begun in the streets of Quebec. You saw on April 11th 25,000 people walking in the streets of Quebec City, asking for obviously a real and concrete plan to act on climate change that would include a clear refusal of the Energy East pipeline project. And maybe it's pertinent to precise that the fact that 25,000 people were in Quebec City on April 11th is really something. We've seen big protests in the streets of Montreal in the last years, but to see in Quebec City that much people is really something we haven't seen in a very long time. Like you maybe know, the region around Quebec City is the only place in Quebec where the Conservatives of Stephen Harper have ridings. They have maybe 1 or 2 ridings elsewhere, but it's essentially there that Stephen Harper has his only ridings in Quebec. So it's historically a very conservative region. And the fact that in that region, 25,000 people showed up against Energy East is a sign that there is a real massive mobilization from the ground up. So that Act on Climate March was a real success. Was organized between student groups, First Nation groups, unions, NGOs, and community groups, which I will talk about later. So that was a big victory to be able to show that we have that power of mobilization against Energy East. But few weeks before that, there was another important victory that is also a sign that the mobilization is going well. One of the important parts of the Energy East pipeline project was the building of a maritime terminal in Kakuna, which is a small village on the shores, on the coast of the St. Lawrence River, 200 kilometers north of Quebec City. And that maritime terminal in Kakuna was one of the big arguments of TransCanada to sell the project to Quebecers, saying with that maritime terminal we're going to have long-term jobs, quality jobs to give to the region. They chose a region of Quebec that needs jobs. It's a strategy that is not new. So they were offering few dozens of jobs to that region, saying if you accept the building of that maritime terminal, you will be able to start again the economy of your region. But the good news is that there was an intense legal and grassroots mobilization against that specific terminal, because TransCanada had made the mistake to choose as a site for their terminal a very ecological, sensible ecosystem that was necessary to the reproduction of the belugas in the St. Lawrence River. It's one of the few places in the world where this endangered species can still reproduce itself. So I don't know what they thought by choosing that, honestly. So it started a very intense legal battle around the protection of the belugas, and the controversy around that specific part of the project really contributed in putting Energy East in the center of the public discussion in Quebec, because belugas are cute, they're white, and people don't want to like hurt them. So the beluga became kind of a mascot for the. No, of course, yeah, I'm serious. It became sort of a symbol. Let's say a symbol of the struggle against TransCanada, and there was an important legal setback for TransCanada. A court reversed a decision of the Ministry of Environment to forbid TransCanada to do drillings in this very sensible spot in the St. Lawrence River. TransCanada disobeyed the court order, continued to do his drillings, and then the Superior Court of Quebec once again they took away the certificate that gave the permission to TransCanada to do the drillings, and then the government, obviously, after all that controversy, had no choice but to say to TransCanada that they could not build their maritime terminal. Few days later, there was a new study that changed the status of the beluga species from endangered to in risk of extinction. That's it. So because of all that specific part of the project was abandoned by TransCanada, and that was a big victory for the environmental movement. Obviously, the fact that TransCanada abandoned that very specific part of the project, it does not mean that the project itself, in general, is dead, but still it was a very big setback for the company's credibility. A few days before I announced my donation to this cause, there was a major leak of the public relations strategy of TransCanada in the media. A big document written by the private firm Edelman was being given to Radio-Canada that revealed, for example, their very big strategy of astroturfing, their strategy of creating false Twitter and Facebook accounts, to support the project. In brief, we can say that all this controversy around Kakuna really damaged the company's reputation. And since their setback in Kakuna, they said that the project would be delayed for 1.5 or 2 years. So we can say that we've bought time, a significant amount of time, by succeeding to cancel that specific part of the project in Kakuna, but still the fight obviously is not over. TransCanada will propose a new project. Will they try to install a new maritime terminal somewhere else? It's a possibility, but to do that, they would have to start another battle in the public opinion in order to convince one community to accept the establishment of that port. So the second possibility is, in my humble opinion, more probable. That second possibility is that they choose to do no maritime terminal at all, and just try to make the build a pipeline through Quebec without any port for exportation in Quebec. That would be easier for them on a public relations point of view, but in terms of jobs, it would decrease even more the number of jobs. So now they're kind of in a lose-lose situation where they have to choose between another controversy and diminishing again the economic benefits, which are already ridiculous. So we have them in the corner. They're pretty weak, but still the mobilization is ongoing. One of the main vehicle of that mobilization is a network, or let's say a coalition of community groups, of citizens committees, in parallel to the path of the Energy East Pipeline project. It's called Coule Pas Chez Nous. It's the coalition which I gave my literary prize, and it's very interesting because it's a form of mobilization that succeeded in Quebec in 2011 to force the government to impose a moratorium on shale gas exploitation. And now those citizens are using the same tactic, which is to create local cells of citizens in all the municipalities or villages along the route of the pipeline. They already have convinced 75 municipalities to take official position that they will refuse the construction of the pipeline on their territory. In some regions, they have already convinced 1/3 of the landowners to sign a declaration saying that they will also refuse the pipeline to pass on their farms, on their lands. So really, this type of mobilization is working. Every day we see more and more municipalities, mayors, or landowners saying that they won't let that pipeline through. So this coalition is also doing a very interesting job to create resistance all around the route of the Energy East pipeline. Just before going to the Q&A with Ethan, maybe a brief overview of the political landscape in Quebec and its position on the Energy East pipeline. On the provincial level, the Parti libéral du Québec, which is the party which is in power right now, led by the Prime Minister Philippe Couillard, have a clear position in favor of the project. The Environment Ministry, David Hurtel, said in a recent interview that by principle, his government had a préjugé favorable to this kind of project, which means a
preconceived support, preconceived notion of support.
Preconceived notion of support in favor of any pipeline project. So it's pretty clear that that government is willing to do pretty much everything in order to make those projects a reality. So for the Parti libéral du Québec, the position is very clear. There's a center-right populist party called Coalition Avenir Québec, which is the second opposition in Quebec, that is also in favor of the project. And there is the Parti québécois, which is currently in a leadership race. Yeah, that's what you say, a leadership race. And it's actually a very, very important subject of debate inside that center-left party in Quebec, and which is a good news because it's a proof that the mobilization on the ground succeeded in making Energy East a real major pivotal political issue. So the candidates are fighting over their position on Energy East. So the result of that race will determine the position of the party of the Parti québécois on
You
Energy.
should mention we know what the result of that
Yeah,
race will be.
the result is pretty known. Should be Pierre Calpelado, which is the owner of the corporation Québécois Média, and his position is not clear yet. He said sometimes that he was in favor, sometimes he was against. So for the Parti Québécois, we don't really know what the position will be. And there is obviously Québec Solidaire, who has 3 MPs in the National Assembly of Quebec, and they are officially against it, but unfortunately it's for the moment a pretty marginal political force in Quebec. So even if they are in total solidarity with the resistance on the ground, their concrete impact is for the moment pretty minor. So at the provincial level, let's say it's pretty difficult. The political landscape is pretty difficult for the mobilization, but the polls are saying in Quebec that that a clear majority of Quebecers are clearly opposed to the project. We're talking, some polls say even more than 66% of Quebecers are clearly opposed to the Energy East project. So that could be an incentive for the parties to shift their position. On the federal level now, well, you probably know already the positions of the parties. Well, the Conservative Party, you may guess the position. The Liberal Party of Justin Trudeau is also in favor of it. The Bloc Québécois is the only party that has a clear position against the pipeline. And there is the NDP that is still, I would say, a question mark on that issue, waiting to have a clear position, sometimes saying that they would approve it if the environmental evaluation process would be stronger, sometimes saying that, no, it's for domestic consumption, so we should accept it. The position is unclear. We're hearing that there is a lot of debate inside the party itself on the issue. So going in direction of the federal election next fall, a lot of people in Quebec are more and more calling the NDP and asking the NDP to have a clear position on the issue. Personally, I've said it a lot in the last weeks and the last months, saying that if this party wants really to be considered as an alternative to the Conservative government, they have to have a clear position on that issue, a position against that project, and if they want to keep their votes and their ridings in Quebec, they have to have a position that reflects the position of the majority of people in Quebec, which is clearly against that project. So the mobilization is building toward the election to really challenge the two parties that pretend to be an alternative to the Conservative, and including students that are more and more mobilized on the issue, that are preparing themselves really to be on the ground and asking the candidates to have a clear position. And that, I think, summarizes the political the political part. Before going to the Q&A with Ethan, I've been surprised to see in the last days Rachel Notley, the new premier of Alberta, and the Burnaby mayor here in BC, both having a pretty similar position, saying that Kinder Morgan and Northern Gateway pipelines were bad pipelines in comparison to Energy East, that would be a good pipeline project. Well, you should not be laughing at me because them who said it. And when I heard that, I was pretty inquiet. How do you say that?
Unhappy, troubled.
Inquiet.
Troubled.
Yeah, I was pretty troubled by that because it seems to me like there can be a strategy that could be dangerous. A strategy that could be dangerous to try to convince people in the west of Canada that the good way to get rid of pipelines here is to send them the other way. I'm sure it's not your case, but I think as activists that I'm pretty sure agree on the fundamental reasons why we are opposed to those projects. And that fundamental reason is the necessary fight against climate change. I think our priority together should be to refuse that perspective, to refuse to mobilize against each other, and the opposite, send a clear message to the political class that we will not accept to be divided and turned against each other, but that we will say no pipeline to the west, no pipeline to the east, because we want us. because we want the tar sands expansion to stop, and because we want to shift towards a new form of economy that is cleaner and also democratic. So I think I'll end on that. Going to the Q&A with Ethan, he refused to reveal to me the questions, so I'm sure it's going to be very difficult ones.
That was great. Thank you.